Dear Apple, the iPad needs help. Let me explain. About a month ago, Apple launched the new iPad Pro, and I spent over $3,000 ordering the fully spec'd out one for myself. I was so excited, I thought, oh my god, the iPad is now more powerful than I could ever possibly need. This can be my sketchpad, my laptop, my Netflix device, my gaming machine. I can do all of my computing on this one tablet that's barely 5mm thin. And you know what? I was right. At least about that part. I'll never forget my first day setting up this iPad. I was in absolute awe. My whole plan was to see if I could use this to replace my big, chunky 16-inch MacBook Pro. Kind of proves the point. And so I was one by one going through all the things that I did on this and setting them up here. And basically everything just worked. Every account login took seconds thanks to Apple's keychain password memory and Face ID. The fact that the iPad has Face ID where the Mac still doesn't meant that I barely needed to lift a finger, and everything was set up. But also, you know how Apple constantly describes this iPad as a magic sheet of glass? Yeah, I know, the marketing talk is crazy. But in a way, that quote finally made sense to me on this day. The screen feels like it should not be as bright as it is, considering how thin the iPad is. The thumb rejection, how you can grip the thing in one hand and scroll with the other, and the touchscreen understands what you're doing and ignores your thumb, it does feel like magic. And most importantly, it doesn't matter which way you're using it. You can rotate it any orientation you want, and the bezels are completely even whichever way you pick. Face ID works in any orientation, but also volume buttons. I realized that they flip. So when you hold the iPad this way, left turns your volume down, right turns it up. But then when you rotate the iPad 180 degrees, the buttons remap themselves so that from your perspective, left is still volume down, right is still volume up. I'd assumed it might be slower than my maxed out MacBook Pro. And I mean, look at the chunk difference. Would you be surprised? But it isn't. It is so fast. I thought I'd have difficulties with battery life. Barely. The battery, while definitely not as good as a MacBook Pro, is still better than what you get on most laptops. I love the fact that my main computer would actually have cellular data now. And I did initially think this was going to be some next level monthly expense, but it turns out prepaid data only eSIMs, they're actually okay. I found a plan that's going to cost me £100 for my hopefully year's worth of data usage. I even jumped into some video calls and I was just like, what? This webcam is amazing. It's crisp, it's flattering, but also it has center stage, which means just like those actually physically rotating webcams you can buy, it follows you around the room and actually keeps you in the center. Oh yeah, and the games. If you're someone who plays a lot of games on your phone, let me tell you, they hit very different on an iPad. You're getting like the biggest, brightest, clearest picture possible. Not to mention that you will not have to worry about performance. This thing absolutely eats mobile games for breakfast. So in case you can't already tell, I was initially in love with this thing. So where on earth did it go wrong? Well, day 2, when I actually started trying to do some proper work on it. I woke up, I plugged it into my monitor, like I've been doing for years with my laptop, and I settled into my desk for a good day's research. Mr. Cook, my mouse was not working. Wow. For years, I've been using Logitech's very good MX Master Mouse that works perfectly on Mac, and for some reason, I'm getting to the why later, but for some reason, it was performing terribly. The scroll wheel was incredibly laggy and unresponsive, like unusably so. So I was having to scroll by clicking and dragging across the page like some unstoppable moron. But to top it all off, I keep disconnecting. I spent half of my first working day trying to troubleshoot my mouse, trying all sorts of other options and eventually coming to the conclusion that, okay, there's one accessory that probably will work well on this, Apple's Magic Mouse. So I ordered one. It arrived, and you know what? Yes it does. It works perfectly. But let me tell you, the ergonomics of this mouse are anything but magic. It's super flat, it's kind of sharp, and it still requires you to arch your fingers to use it like a trackpad instead of having a much more hand-friendly scroll wheel. I've actually had quite a few issues with my hands from long periods of time clawing like this. It's not good for you, but what choice did I have? So, can you imagine my reaction when I realized that the same thing was happening to my keyboard? It honestly felt like a cartoonish problem to be having in this day and age, but sometimes my spacebar just randomly started inserting 2 spaces each time. But worse still, it would very often just stop typing. And you know me, I don't normally rage at things, but this really started to tick me off. And again, 0 issues with the Mac, but for some reason the iPad is extremely unreliable with third-party Bluetooth accessories. Okay, so rough start. But then it got worse, and then I started to notice a pattern. Because the next thing that I tried was screenshots. You know, it's only on this iPad that I've realized how much I rely on screenshots. Because look at this. If you're on a Mac and you want to send someone what you're looking at, you tap a few buttons, you select the area you want to share, and then just drag and drop that file over to whoever you're sending it to. On the iPad, you press those same buttons, and for some bizarre reason, you just can't. Instead, the iPad takes a screenshot of not just the screen you're on, but also any screen you're connected to. And it takes the whole thing. So every single time you have to delete one of the screenshots and then manually use the touch screen to resize each corner of the second one till you have what you want. And then the dragging and dropping too. Like 50% of the time, that doesn't work either, as each app is siloed with its own set of rules for how you add files to them. Actually, you know what? Let me just rapid fire through the plethora of unnecessary issues that I've had with this iPad, and then I'll explain why I think it's happening. For example, you can't rearrange your Safari favorites by just dragging. You instead have to go into a convoluted separate side menu. Your favorites bar disappears when you scroll down web pages, meaning that every single time you want to go to one of your favorites, you first have to either scroll back up or move your cursor to the top of the screen before you can click them. You don't actually get a mouse pointer. You get a mouse blob that sort of snaps onto things, so it's quite a bit less precise than using a Mac. And it makes navigating to that subscribe button that bit more difficult. So if you're not using an iPad right now, then a sub to the channel would be smooth. Some websites don't work. The iPad seems to get very confused between virtual keyboards and physical keyboards, and sometimes just decides to give you neither. There's no progress bars when you're transferring or opening files, so you're just left there waiting until something suddenly appears when it's eventually done. Or should I say actually, if it's done. Because the software is much more aggressive with shutting down background processes than a normal computer. So sometimes Amazon purchases, for example, they don't go through unless I keep the window open while they're processing. And there are uploads that I left going on in the background that I later realized silently cancelled themselves. Apps sometimes behave in really unintuitive ways. Like for example, when you're writing documents in your web browser, the iPad teaches you that a double tap highlights your word and then a triple tap highlights your paragraph. But then using the Docs app, it does something completely different and actually expects you to fiddle with a trackpad trying to grab and drag this across. Many apps are really surprisingly poorly formatted for iPad. And don't even get me started on the Instagram app or the fact that there's no official calculator, so you have to resort to downloading someone else's and having a permanent ad stapled across it. Multitasking isn't very good within your apps. Like if I want to type out a new email while looking at another one that I previously sent a while ago, you actually can't do that using the Gmail app. So you end up then having to use multiple different tabs of Gmail in your browser, you know, the same way that you would on your Mac. But then that kind of defeats the main benefit of having these apps that are specifically designed and optimized around this mobile operating system. Oh yeah, and the desktop is way less flexible than a Mac. The iPad does not give you the tools required to be able to use its massive space very well at all. The thing in common with all of these issues, they are extremely fixable. With this iPad, Apple created a brand new superpowered chip. They made it so unbelievably thin, they upgraded the Apple Pencil to a whole other level. It's all really cool stuff. But the thing that's upsetting me is that if instead they'd just done none of that and literally spent like 1 week instead fixing these software quirks, this will be a better product that the pros they're so fervently marketing to can actually use as their main computers. What I'm imagining is happening here is because Apple also sells the Mac, the single product that is most at risk of eating into that it's not Windows laptops at this stage, it is Apple's own iPad. So they're stuck in this weird place of every year making the iPad more pro, but not actually addressing the core things that would allow pros to rely on it, requiring them to still get a MacBook, even though the hardware of this can almost definitely do absolutely everything they want it to. I'm getting to that. There's a few more baked-in iPad issues that would be harder for Apple to fix, like how this screen gets way more fingerprinty than a Mac screen, since it's designed around you touching it. How the speakers shoot outwards instead of forwards like they do on a Mac, so the audio isn't as crisp, and that with the Magic Keyboard, the iPad is extremely top-heavy for a laptop, so while it's fine on a desk, it doesn't feel nearly as stable in your lap. But for me, these are smaller issues that I could learn to live with. So, what am I going to do with this? Am I returning mine? No. I still love it. In small moments, it does frustrate me to high heaven, and I do not understand how Apple thinks this magnet is an acceptable way to keep your very expensive Apple Pencil Pro. It needs some sort of latch, otherwise it's so easy to lose, you have to keep it in a bag. But then when this thing works the way you want it to, it feels like such a life hack. So this is what I'm doing. The iPad has become my travel computer. Anytime I leave the house for a day, I detach this from the keyboard, and this is everything I need, because I know that if I really want to, I will be able to do any computing that I might need to on short notice. And then if I'm going abroad, I will pack this keyboard too, because these two together is 95% of the laptop experience. And in ways better, because the iPad is like so good for watching movies on the plane. And the only reason why I can't just completely ditch my MacBook Pro is just these weird limitations when you're trying to use it as a desktop computer. So for that one specific use case, I am still gonna have to keep the Mac. I'll just leave it permanently docked at the table. So let's see if Apple fixes any of these cons at their next big software WWDC event. Now, while we do a little iPad camera test, I want to tell you about something that I've started using all the time. Anytime you're logging into one of those public Wi-Fis and they're asking for your entire life history, or just giving your details to a website that you don't completely trust. For all of this, I've just started using an alternate ID. I'm not even kidding. You might know me as Aaron Maney, but online, I'm technically Emily. I've been using Surfshark's baked-in alternate ID feature, and it's amazing. It creates every single detail you could possibly need to fill out a form, including an email address that you can actually use for as long or as short as you want to. And it means that you can have a consistent online persona that you can copy and paste into any form in one click that's not actually you. By default, the new email that's set up for you will automatically forward emails that come in to your main email. But the beauty of that is, the second you decide that you no longer need the service that you signed up for, you just cut that email, and you have that peaceful reassurance that you've never actually shared your main email address. And that's just one thing. There's like 15 different reasons why I use Surfshark VPN. Like also just the fact that it's a VPN, and I think it's the best VPN. It's fast, the app is awesome, and it's really affordable, because with the code BOSS, it's literally less than $3 a month, with 4 extra months for free, for an unlimited number of users, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. And so yeah, the camera is definitely a step down from the iPhone, but it's not bad.